Well, joining us now for more is our diplomatic correspondent, Mary McAuliffe. Here we go again, Mary, and it seems like we have it seems like a nonstop run of elections. But is that the fact? I mean, how does it actually stand compared to other countries?
Well, actually, so Israel leads the world in frequency of elections. That's one important to say. It's a title nobody really wants to have, or maybe people just really like going to the elections. You get to hear vacation day from work.
Leader, so we continue to lead the world. Yeah,
exactly. So this year, with this current last round of elections, Israel officially took that #1 spot, just ahead of Greece, Spain, Canada.
Right, I think we have a graph on that. Maybe we can call that up.
Exactly. So we can look at the different countries that Israel trails behind: Greece, Canada, Spain, all these other different countries, and officially taking that top spot now this year. And so the big question is Israel, it had 1 year break of this political paralysis with the election of a new government that was led by Naftali Bennett. But of course, Israel is now going to another round of elections. And overwhelmingly, we're hearing sounds of frustration from many of the voters when we try and ask the Israeli people. We heard that in some of these remarks, but frustration with once again going to the election. But the question is, how well does that actually translate into voter fatigue?
Well, let me ask you that. I mean, we hear all the talk about voter fatigue, but is that a real thing?
So it's absolutely a real thing. The question is whether or not it's actually reflected in the numbers, in the actual turnout. So voter turnout is one of the main ways that you can actually measure this voter turnout. It's measurable how many people actually turned out to vote, because complaining is one thing. If you actually go to the polls, it doesn't really matter so much in terms of voter fatigue. And what we're seeing here in Israel, that throughout this wave of elections, we haven't seen that much impact on the actual people who go out to vote here in Israel. They're continuing to go out in the same amount of numbers. Roughly, we can look at the actual numbers. So April 2019, that was the first round of elections. Voter turnout stood at about 68%, and it's about average for democratic countries. Israel, it's not high, it's not low.
But it's higher than the United States, I believe, 68%.
It is. The United States has its own troubles with voter turnout, but here in Israel, it's one of the things for many Western democratic countries, this rate falls at about the same level. The United States, we can see as an outlier. So the 68% was the voter turnout in the first round of elections. In the next two rounds, voter turnout actually increased, even though one increased to 71%, so hitting one of the all-time highs really in the past decade or so, but then it dropped a bit to 67%. So we're hearing that people complaining it's not translating into this voter turnout. We continue to see Israelis going to the elections and seeing how important these elections are to them, that they still have these strong feelings, because we can also see the polarization. This is also another phenomenon that's being driven by this political turnout. So for some parties, it actually works in their favor that once again have to go to the elections. It's easier for them to try and fire up their base, to try and, for example, if you're in the anti-Netanyahu bloc, to once again think that this could be the election where Netanyahu will officially take turns back. And we're seeing all of this playing into the electioneering, the campaigning about what exactly is going to happen when we look at the turnouts. For example, Netanyahu, we're hearing rumors that this could be his last election. If he doesn't get a high enough majority to actually form a government, maybe he'll step out. Is that something that's actually reflected in turnout, or just part of other parties trying to push the other? So this is all something that we have to watch on election day. But it's also important to note, when we talk about the average turnout rate, there's one sector of the population which drags significantly lower than all the others, and that's the Arab turnout. So Arabs make up 1/5 of Israel's population, but they only vote about 45% actually turn up to vote in the elections.
Much lower than the general average.
Much lower, which also means that of 20% of the population, the vast majority of them do not feel tied to Israel's democratic process. So this continues to be something that we talk about in elections. It will continue to be something we'll talk about in this coming elections, after we're also seeing the historic participation of an Arab party in the coalition. Right. So this is also something we have to watch, is how it affects how they turn out to vote.
Right, and it's likely to the benefit, for example, of the pro-Netanyahu camp, if Arab turnout would be even lower than those historic numbers. So Mary McAuliffe, thank you for that. This is going to be an interesting election for sure.